When superstar athletes begin bringing up your name without being prompted, without a reporter steering the conversation, and without any obligation to do it, that says more than a stat sheet ever could. It means your game is impossible to ignore. And right now, that's exactly what's happening with Caitlin Clark. Across the basketball world, NBA legends and current stars are openly showing respect for what she's doing on the court. Start with Kevin Garnett, because praise from KG is never casual. Garnett built his entire career around intensity, toughness, and an obsession with competition. He was never known for handing out compliments just to be nice. If he respects your game, you earned it the hard way. That's why it stood out when Garnett said Caitlin Clark is one of his 2 favorite players to watch in all of basketball, not just in the WNBA, in basketball, period. That statement alone speaks volumes. KG wasn't talking about hype or popularity. He was talking about pure basketball skill. What grabbed his attention wasn't only the deep shooting or the massive numbers Clark puts up every night, it was the way she sees the game unfold before everyone else does. Garnett kept emphasizing her instincts, her creativity, and the natural feel she has for controlling the floor. The kind of basketball IQ you cannot teach and no scouting report can truly predict. He pointed to the little details that separate great players from special ones. The hesitation dribble that completely throws a defender off balance. The cross-court pass delivered before anyone realizes a teammate is even open. The timing, the patience, the control. Clark doesn't just react to the game, she dictates it. Every possession feels calculated 2 or 3 moves ahead. Even her floater game stood out to him, the way she keeps defenders guessing by changing speeds and angles so naturally. Garnett described her style as having an old-school feel, reminding him of an era where point guards were true floor generals, players whose job was to create rhythm and orchestrate the offense instead of simply hunting their own shots. And that comparison matters coming from someone like Kevin Garnett. This is a Hall of Famer who spent 2 decades battling against some of the smartest and most talented guards the NBA has ever seen. He understands elite basketball minds better than almost anyone. After all those years competing at the highest level, KG sees that same rare level of court awareness and instinct in Caitlin Clark, and that says everything.
Against every type of defender, the best that the female has. She's seen it. You hear what I'm saying?
Shaquille O'Neal rarely spends his time breaking down the finer details of women's college basketball. That has never really been his lane. Shaq built his reputation as one of the most dominant players in NBA history, won 4 championships, and became famous after retirement for speaking his mind without filtering anything. So when he praises a player, it usually comes from raw instinct and genuine excitement rather than carefully crafted analysis. That's why his reaction to Caitlin Clark's historic 49-point performance against Michigan carried so much weight. After she shattered the NCAA women's all-time scoring record during her senior season at Iowa, Shaq didn't hesitate or soften his opinion. He immediately started raving about her lightning-fast release, repeating over and over just how impossible it was to defend. Then he took it even further and flat-out called Clark the greatest female college basketball player ever. No hesitation, no qualifiers. The statement instantly sparked debate, especially when Charles Barkley pushed back by bringing up legends like Maya Moore, Cheryl Miller, and Diana Taurasi. And to be fair, Barkley had a real argument. Those players dominated their eras, won championships, and built legendary college careers that included titles Clark never captured at Iowa. But even while disagreeing on that specific label, Barkley never denied Clark's impact on the sport itself. In fact, he became one of her loudest defenders when conversations shifted toward how some WNBA veterans reacted to the massive attention she brought into the league. Barkley's stance was simple. Caitlin Clark has helped generate more visibility, more revenue, more television exposure, and even improvements like charter flights. In his eyes, the league should appreciate what she has done instead of treating her like a problem. Then there's LeBron James, someone who understands Clark's situation better than almost anyone alive. LeBron entered the NBA carrying expectations no teenager had ever faced before. Before he even played a professional game, he was already labeled the chosen one, appearing on magazine covers while the basketball world dissected every move he made. The pressure was overwhelming, and the spotlight never stopped following him. So when LeBron speaks about Caitlin Clark, there's a level of understanding behind his words that comes from personal experience. He knows what it feels like to walk into a league as the center of attention while still trying to develop as a young player. He understands the challenge of dealing with non-stop media coverage, criticism, and veteran players eager to test whether the hype is deserved. LeBron has consistently praised Clark not just for her talent, but for the maturity she's shown handling all of it. He's described her as someone with the mindset and leadership qualities capable of changing an entire franchise. He even compared her potential impact on the Indiana Fever to what Tamika Catchings once meant for the organization, drawing a connection between a transcendent player and the way one superstar can completely reshape a team's future. LeBron also addressed one of the biggest controversies of Clark's rookie season, her exclusion from the 2024 Olympic roster. His message was clear: women's basketball is entering a new era, and ignoring the momentum surrounding Clark made little sense if the goal was growing the sport globally. From his perspective, the Olympics would have been the perfect stage to showcase the league's rising star to an international audience. The more time passes, the harder that decision becomes to justify. Then there's Kevin Durant, whose opinion stands out because he recognized Clark's greatness before the rest of the basketball world caught on. Long before the sold-out arenas and national headlines, Durant saw her at an AAU tournament in Chicago while she was still in high school. At the time, she wasn't yet a household name. She hadn't broken records or become a national sensation, but Durant noticed immediately that she was different. What impressed him most wasn't raw athleticism. It was the way she controlled the entire game. Durant described everyone else on the court as looking slower than Clark mentally and physically. The offense revolved around her every move. She dictated pace, controlled spacing, and manipulated defenses like a seasoned professional years before reaching college basketball's biggest stage. Durant instantly believed she was the best player in the country, regardless of gender, and he said it openly. Later, when Clark exploded into national fame during Iowa's Final Four runs, Durant explained even further what made her special. He loved the way she attracted defensive pressure and then punished teams for overcommitting. Defenders would collapse toward her expecting a shot, only for Clark to fire a perfect pass to an open teammate. That's what reminded Durant of playing alongside Steph Curry in Golden State. Curry's shooting gravity constantly warped defenses, creating opportunities for everyone around him. Durant recognized that same effect in Clark's game. Defenses become so obsessed with stopping her that the entire floor opens up for her teammates. That ability to elevate everyone else is one of the highest levels of offensive intelligence a player can reach. And speaking of Steph Curry, the comparisons between him and Caitlin Clark have followed her for years. Ever since her breakout run at Iowa, fans and analysts have connected the two because of the deep shooting range, the quick release, and the way they stretch defenses far beyond normal limits. Some people questioned whether the comparison was fair or if it oversimplified Clark's game, but Steph himself eventually addressed it directly, and the way he talked about Clark made one thing obvious: he has studied her game closely, and he clearly respects what he sees.
Thought the performance, at least at 41, almost triple double, yeah. He was shooting, letting that ball fly. I watched a little bit, but then I had to do some.
Steph Curry didn't speak about Caitlin Clark in vague or generic terms. He wasn't just saying she's exciting to watch or that she has talent. He broke her game down with the eye of someone who truly understands what makes an elite shooter dangerous. And that matters because no one in basketball history has changed the sport from the perimeter the way Curry has. What stood out to Steph was how closely Clark's mechanics mirror his own approach to the game. He pointed directly to her release speed, saying it's nearly identical to his. The quick trigger, the confidence to launch from well beyond the arc, and the fearlessness to pull up from logo range without hesitation. Those aren't random qualities to him. They're the exact traits that made him impossible to defend at his peak. Curry explained that once Clark crosses half court, defenses already have to panic because she's immediately within shooting distance. That changes everything. It stretches the floor in a way very few players ever can. Defenders are forced to pick her up earlier than normal, and the moment they overreact to the shot, she punishes them with her passing. That's the part Curry seemed to admire most, the balance between scoring and playmaking. If defenders focus too heavily on stopping the three, Clark picks them apart with passes. If they collapse to take away teammates, she buries the shot herself. According to Curry, that constant guessing game is what makes her so difficult to contain. And this wasn't some casual celebrity praise. This was the greatest shooter the sport has ever seen, giving a detailed explanation of why her skill set creates impossible defensive problems. He wasn't complimenting her out of politeness. He was recognizing a player who sees the game through a very similar lens. Someone who believes basketball should be played with spacing, creativity, deep shooting, range, and relentless pressure on defenses. The comparisons between Steph Curry and Caitlin Clark were always going to happen because of the obvious similarities in style, but once Curry himself openly acknowledged those similarities and explained them in technical basketball terms, it became much harder to dismiss the comparison as hype or exaggeration. Then there's Luka Doncic, one of the most gifted offensive players in the NBA today. Luka is a nightly triple-double threat, a shot creator capable of making impossible baskets look routine, and one of the most creative scorers in modern basketball. Yet, even he admitted something that caught people off guard. After watching Clark play, Doncic openly said she might actually be a better shooter than he is. And he didn't try to walk it back afterward. No excuses, no qualifiers about different leagues or different levels of physicality. He simply gave her the respect directly. She shoots it better than him. End of discussion. That's a massive statement coming from someone of Luka's caliber. His ability to score from anywhere on the floor already makes him one of the most dangerous offensive weapons in basketball. So for him to acknowledge Clark's perimeter shooting as being on another level says a lot about how NBA stars truly view her. Skill set. Analysts had already spent time comparing Clark's college production to Luka's NBA numbers because of their similarities as high-usage creators who combine scoring with elite passing vision, but hearing Doncic himself praise her shooting ability took those comparisons to another level entirely. And then there's Trey Young, another player who understands exactly why Clark is such a nightmare for defenses. According to Trey, too many people focus only on her three-point shooting while overlooking another huge part of her game, her ability to attack off the dribble and break defenses down getting to the rim.
This last year and the Fever as a whole, to see Kelsey get some playoff experience, and just the whole group, Aaliyah, the whole group. So just really cool to follow the team.
Trey Young explained Caitlin Clark's game in a way that went far deeper than simply talking about her shooting range. What stood out in his breakdown was the strategy behind everything she does offensively. And coming from Trey, that analysis carries real weight because he plays with a very similar style himself. He understands exactly how difficult it is to defend a guard who can score from anywhere while also controlling every defensive reaction on the floor. Young pointed out that Clark doesn't immediately rely on deep threes to dominate Instead, she starts by attacking the rim. Early on, she pressures defenses with drives, gets easy baskets near the hoop, forces defenders into foul trouble, and makes opponents uncomfortable trying to stop her downhill movement. As defenders begin reacting to those drives, everything changes. They tighten up their coverage. They stop giving her space. They step higher to cut off the lane and try to prevent her from getting to the basket again. And according to Trey, that's the exact moment Clark becomes almost impossible to guard from the perimeter. The defender has already made the mistake by overcommitting. Once they creep too close, trying to stop the drive, Clark instantly shifts gears. She plants, creates separation with the step back, and fires the three before the defense can recover. At that point, the possession is already over. Trey even described how she uses her dribble to read defenders in real time almost, baiting them into making the wrong decision. She studies whether they're preparing for another drive, then punishes that reaction with the jumper. To him, it wasn't random scoring. It was calculated offense. Every move had a purpose tied to what she planned to do later in the game. What impressed Young most was the level of planning behind it all. He saw a player thinking several possessions ahead, using first quarter drives to create fourth quarter shooting opportunities. That's not just talent, that's elite offensive IQ. Trey recognized how Clark blends every layer of her game together. The shooting sets up the driving opens up the passing forces defenses to rotate, which creates even more scoring chances. There's never a single adjustment that fully stops her because taking away one option only unlocks another. And that's why Young related to her style so strongly. He understands what it feels like to run an offense where every defensive decision can be manipulated. He's lived it himself in the NBA, and he immediately recognized that same advanced understanding in Clark's game. Then there's Tyrese Haliburton, the leader of the Indiana Pacers and one of the biggest stars in Indianapolis. When he was asked about Caitlin Clark arriving in Indiana, his reaction captured something many basketball fans already sensed, but hadn't fully put into words yet.
Caitlin is the most popular WNBA player, but she's not the best at this time. Just like Larry and I were not the best when we entered the league. We became the best later on by our play.
Tyrese Haliburton's reaction to Caitlin Clark arriving in Indianapolis felt completely genuine. It wasn't forced excitement for the cameras or the kind of automatic praise athletes sometimes give during interviews. You could tell he truly understood what her presence meant for the city and for basketball in Indiana as a whole. Indianapolis has always treated basketball like part of its identity. The Pacers and Fever represent a fan base that lives and breathes the sport, but both franchises had been searching for renewed energy and momentum. Clark instantly brought that. She arrived with the kind of star power capable of changing expectations overnight. The type of player who makes an entire city believe something special might finally be happening again. Haliburton talked about how exciting it was that both he and Clark now represented Indianapolis under the same roof. Instead of preparing defensive schemes to stop her, he could finally just enjoy watching her play. He spoke about seeing her development over time, watching her evolve into the superstar everyone believed she could become. More than anything, his comments reflected pride, not just admiration for Clark as a player, but excitement over what she could mean for the city's basketball culture. Moving forward, Indiana has always been known as basketball country, and Haliburton's reaction sounded like someone realizing the next face of that tradition had officially arrived. Then there's Victor Wembanyama, whose respect for Clark may stand out more than almost anyone else's, because it started long before the national obsession reached its peak, before the record-breaking ratings, before the endless headlines, and before Clark became one of the biggest names in sports. Wembanyama was already paying attention. When he was asked which WNBA player inspired him the most, he answered immediately, Caitlin Clark. And what made the response so powerful was how detailed and sincere his explanation was afterward. Wembanyama said that during her Iowa career, Clark was the one college basketball player, male or female, who truly amazed him. He described her as perhaps the most impressive college player he had ever watched across the entire sport. Think about how significant that is coming from someone like Victor Wembanyama. This is a generational NBA talent, a player many already view as one of the future faces of basketball worldwide. Even during his own historic rise, the player who captured his attention most was Clark dominating games in the Big Ten. What makes it even more interesting is that the respect clearly goes both ways. After Wembanyama exploded for a historic playoff performance in 2026, setting the record for the most first-half points ever scored in a postseason debut, Clark reacted on social media with a simple message: Wemby is ridiculous. There's something fascinating about the connection between those two. Consecutive #1 picks, Rookie of the Year winners, players expected to completely reshape their leagues for the next decade, and both clearly recognizing greatness in the other while they're still at the beginning of their careers. Then there's Magic Johnson, whose perspective may carry the deepest historical meaning of all. When Jimmy Kimmel compared Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese to Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, Magic didn't dismiss the comparison. Instead, he leaned into it while adding an important layer of truth behind what those rivalries actually represent. Magic explained that when he and Bird entered the NBA, they weren't immediately considered the league's best players. What they were, however, was the most talked about. They brought attention, television ratings, new fans, and a level of cultural energy the NBA desperately needed at the time. And because of that, attention, veteran players targeted them from day one. According to Magic, that's exactly what Clark is experiencing now. Veterans challenged him and Bird physically and mentally because they didn't appreciate younger stars arriving with more publicity and bigger headlines than established players ever received themselves. In his view, Clark is dealing with the same kind of resistance. But Magic also made something else very clear. Popularity alone is never enough. At some point, the talent has to fully match the spotlight. He openly acknowledged that players like A'ja Wilson, Breanna Stewart, and Nafisa Collier are currently ahead of Clark as complete WNBA players, but he also emphasized that Clark has the potential to close that gap through growth, discipline, and continued development. The path Magic described sounded very familiar because it mirrors his own journey. A massively popular young player enters the league, faces skepticism and hostility, keeps improving, and eventually grows into the greatness everyone expected. Magic understands that process because he lived it himself at the highest level imaginable. And that's really the common thread connecting every NBA legend and superstar who has spoken about Caitlin Clark. Whether it's Hall of Famers who have seen every era of basketball or current players dominating today's game, the reaction is strikingly similar. They recognize something rare. They see the deep shooting range, the lightning quick release, the passing creativity, the court vision, the toughness under pressure, and the ability to elevate teammates simply by stepping on the floor. Those are qualities elite players immediately recognize because they've spent their entire careers studying and competing against those exact traits themselves. Kevin Durant saw it in a high school gym before most fans even knew her name. Victor Wembanyama watched from another continent and called her the most impressive college player he'd ever seen. Steph Curry broke down the technical similarities in their games and validated the comparisons people kept making, and LeBron James looked at the pressure surrounding Clark and understood exactly what that spotlight feels like. When players of that caliber repeatedly bring up Caitlin Clark without being asked, when they go out of their way to praise her because they genuinely respect what they're watching, that's a level of recognition statistics alone can never fully explain.